I stood frozen in the boardroom as our most important client demo crashed, displaying a $95,000 per hour penalty clock. The director publicly blamed me for a catastrophic software error I never created. Just yesterday, he mocked my remote work request for my mother's cancer treatments, cutting my system access. Now, with millions at stake, the chairman announced I was incapable of fixing it. What no one knew. I secretly backed up the correct code version that could save everyone. My name is Mercedes, and this is how I turned the worst day of my career into my greatest triumph. I never planned to become the scapegoat for a $75,000 mistake. 5 years ago, I joined TechVantage as an eager 27-year-old junior developer with big dreams and bigger student loans. The company specialized in critical infrastructure management systems for major utilities, and I quickly found my niche optimizing the back-end systems that prevented costly grid failures. My methodical approach and attention to detail earned me 3 promotions in 5 years, landing me the coveted role of lead systems architect for our flagship PowerGuard platform. My team respected me. My performance reviews were stellar. The only dark cloud in my professional life was Scott Andrews, the director of product development. From my first week, Scott seemed determined to undermine me at every turn. He questioned my technical decisions in meetings, reassigned my successful projects to male colleagues, and conveniently forgot to mention my name when presenting my innovations to upper management. I tried everything the professional development books recommended, speaking up more assertively, documenting my contributions, building alliances with other managers. Nothing changed. Scott continued treating me like an unwelcome intruder in his technical kingdom. Then, 3 months ago, my mother called with news that shattered my carefully structured world. "The doctors found something," she said, her voice unnaturally calm. "They need to start treatment right away. Cancer." The word hung between us, unspoken but deafening. My father had passed away 2 years earlier, and my mother lived alone 40 minutes outside the city. She would need rides to chemotherapy, help with groceries, someone to accompany her to appointments. As an only child, that someone could only be me. I spent a week developing a comprehensive remote work proposal. I documented my productivity metrics working from home during the pandemic. I created a detailed coverage plan for in-person meetings. I even secured endorsements from team members who praised my responsiveness when working remotely. The morning I presented my request to Scott, I felt prepared for any reasonable objection. What I wasn't prepared for was the public humiliation he orchestrated. "Team, Mercedes has just informed me she's planning to work from home indefinitely," Scott announced during our weekly status meeting, completely mischaracterizing my carefully limited request. Apparently, the office environment we provide isn't compatible with her personal priorities. 20 pairs of eyes turned to me. My cheeks burned. "I've only requested flexibility for the days of my mother's cancer treatments," I clarified, my voice steadier than I felt. "All my deadlines will be met, and I've prepared a detailed coverage plan." Scott's smile never reached his eyes. "We're finalizing a $40 million contract with National Grid. Do you think they care about your personal problems?" The room fell uncomfortably silent. "My personal problem is cancer," I said quietly. "And no, they probably don't care about that. But they do care about getting a fully functional system delivered on time, which is what my plan ensures." Scott's expression hardened. "The board presentation is in 2 weeks. You can sort out your family drama after that." I should have recognized the warning signs. Scott's increasing hostility, the way he began excluding me from key meetings, his sudden interest in the technical details of my automated testing framework. The same framework he later presented to the CTO as his own innovation, claiming it had saved the company from missing critical deadlines. I discovered this theft accidentally, overhearing him in the break room. "My testing framework is what saved the National Grid contract," he boasted to a new project manager. "Caught 2 critical failures that would have slipped through traditional QA. My testing framework. The one I had spent 6 months developing, documenting, and implementing. The one that had initially been met with skepticism when I proposed it, until it proved its value by catching exactly the kinds of bugs Scott was now taking credit for finding. I should have confronted him then. Should have stood up for myself and my work. But the PowerGuard demonstration to the board and National Grid executives was just days away. The system I had architected would be showcased as the cornerstone of the company's growth strategy. I couldn't risk anything jeopardizing that presentation. After it succeeded, I'd have leverage to address Scott's behavior. 2 nights before the presentation, I stayed late finalizing the demonstration environment. The system needed to handle a simulated grid emergency without failing, showing how it could prevent the cascading failures that had caused major blackouts in 3 states last summer. Those blackouts had cost utilities millions in emergency responses and penalties, creating the perfect market for our PowerGuard system. As I ran the final tests, I noticed something odd: recent changes to the codebase that I hadn't authorized, small but significant modifications to the failover protection systems I had designed. The changes appeared to optimize for speed, stripping away redundancies that might slow performance during the demo but were essential for real-world reliability. I checked the logs. The changes had been made by Ethan, a talented but inexperienced junior developer who reported to Scott. This made no sense. No modifications should have been made without my approval as systems architect. I immediately documented the unauthorized changes and restored the original, tested code. Then, following an instinct I couldn't quite explain, I backed up the entire codebase to my secure personal drive and took detailed screenshots documenting the current state of the system. Something felt wrong, and my mother always taught me to trust my intuition. Little did I know that my caution would soon prove justified, in ways I couldn't possibly have imagined. The morning of my mother's second chemotherapy session dawned gray and drizzly. I woke at 5, answered emails, and reviewed the PowerGuard documentation before driving to my mother's house. Her face looked pale against the blue scarf she'd wrapped around her head, but her smile remained undimmed. "You don't have to do this," she said as I helped her into the car. "Of course I do," I replied, checking that her seatbelt was secure. That's what daughters are for. The oncology center was busier than I expected. After settling Mom in a treatment chair with a blanket and her Kindle, I found a quiet corner in the waiting room and opened my laptop. The board presentation was tomorrow, and I wanted to run one final series of stress tests on the PowerGuard system before the demonstration. I logged in remotely, my fingers flying across the keyboard as I initiated the testing sequence. Everything looked perfect. The system handled simulated grid emergencies exactly as designed, activating failover protections and preventing cascading failures without human intervention. My 6 months of meticulous work was ready for its moment in the spotlight. My phone rang at 10:30. Scott's name flashing on the screen. Odd. He never called me directly. "Mercedes, where are you right now?" His voice sounded artificially pleasant, with an undercurrent I couldn't quite identify. "I'm at the oncology center for my mother's treatment, working remotely as approved by HR," I answered, a slight defensiveness creeping into my tone. "I'm running the final checks on PowerGuard before tomorrow's demonstration." "You're on speaker," Scott said, his voice suddenly louder. "Gordon from the CTO's office is here with me. We have concerns about remote access to critical systems so close to the board presentation." My stomach tightened. I've been using the secure VPN connection as required by IT security protocols. All my work is being logged and documented according to procedure. "I don't pay you to sit on a couch and make excuses," Scott snapped, dropping the facade of pleasantness. "Critical work is being delayed because you've decided your personal life takes precedence over company priorities." My cheeks burned with anger and humiliation. That's not true. I'm completing all assigned tasks and meeting every deadline. The PowerGuard system is fully prepared for tomorrow's demonstration, which you can verify in the testing logs. "Here's what's going to happen," Scott continued as if I hadn't spoken. "For security reasons, your remote access is being revoked effective immediately. You can return to the office tomorrow for the presentation or consider your role on this project reassigned." "What?" I nearly shouted, drawing concerned glances from other people in the waiting room. I lowered my voice. "Scott, that makes no sense. I need to finish the final system checks today. The presentation is tomorrow morning." "We'll handle it," Scott said dismissively. "Ethan has already made some optimizations to improve performance during the demonstration." "Optimizations? What optimizations?" Alarm bells rang in my head. No changes should be made without going through the proper testing protocols. Ethan doesn't have the system knowledge to. The call disconnected abruptly. I immediately tried to log back into the system, but my credentials were already revoked. a cold wave of panic washed over me. Not only was I locked out of the system I had built from the ground up, but unauthorized changes were being made right before the most important demonstration in the company's history. I tried calling Scott back. No answer. I emailed the CTO. No response. I sent a detailed message to the IT security team explaining the situation. Nothing. My mother's treatment wouldn't be finished for another 2 hours. I couldn't leave her there alone, but every minute that passed increased my anxiety about what was happening to my system. I called Tara from the quality assurance team, the one person I trusted completely to give me straight information. Mercedes, thank God, she answered in a hushed voice. Things are crazy here. Scott has Ethan making all kinds of last-minute changes to the PowerGuard code. When I asked about testing protocols, Scott said we were under executive orders to optimize for demonstration impact and could backfill documentation later. My blood ran cold. What specific changes are they making? They're stripping out most of your redundancy systems to improve the response time metrics. Scott wants to show a sub-second emergency response in the demo. Ethan tried to explain the redundancies were there for a reason, but Scott insisted they were just slowing things down unnecessarily. Those redundancies were the heart of what made PowerGuard revolutionary. They were designed to prevent exactly the kind of cascading failures that had caused the 3-state blackout. Without them, the system might look faster in a controlled demo but would fail catastrophically under real-world conditions. Tara, this is bad, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Those changes will compromise the entire system. Can you get me emergency access credentials? I already tried, she replied miserably. Scott has locked everything down. He's telling everyone you had a family emergency and abandoned the project at a critical moment. The injustice of it burned like acid. For 5 years I had given everything to this company. Late nights, weekends, canceled vacations. I had built PowerGuard from concept to functioning system, solving problems everyone else thought were unsolvable. And now I was being portrayed as unreliable and uncommitted because I needed to support my mother through cancer treatment. Mercedes? My mother's voice broke through my spiraling thoughts. I looked up to see her standing before me, a nurse at her side. Your mother had a reaction to the treatment, the nurse explained gently. We need to keep her under observation for a few more hours. She's asking for you. Work crisis or not, some things take precedence. I spent the next 3 hours holding my mother's hand as she drifted in and out of sleep, her body fighting both cancer and the treatment meant to cure it. In those quiet hours, my mind worked furiously, developing and discarding plans to address the PowerGuard situation. By the time we arrived home that evening, I had formulated my approach. I couldn't stop whatever changes Scott and Ethan had made, but I had my backups and documentation. If things went sideways during the demonstration, I would be prepared to step in with solutions. I stayed up until 2 in the morning documenting everything. The unauthorized changes I had discovered 2 days ago, Scott's sudden revocation of my access, Tara's report of the redundancy systems being compromised. I compiled performance metrics, testing logs, and design documentation showing exactly why those redundancies were critical. Then I prepared an emergency restoration plan that could quickly re-implement the proper code if needed. Everything was organized, documented, and ready on my laptop. If disaster struck tomorrow, I would be prepared to step in and save the day. What I didn't anticipate was just how spectacular that disaster would be, or how publicly Scott would try to destroy my career in the aftermath. I arrived at the office at 7 the next morning, a full 2 hours before the board presentation was scheduled to begin. My security badge still worked for the main entrance, but when I tried to access the development floor, the reader flashed red, denied. Mercedes! Tara hurried toward me from the elevator bank, her expression a mixture of relief and concern. I've been trying to reach you. Your security clearance has been downgraded. You can't access the development floor anymore. What? I stared at her in disbelief. How am I supposed to attend the demonstration? Scott told security you were on personal leave and shouldn't have access to critical systems, Tara explained, lowering her voice as other employees passed by. I can sign you in as my guest, but that won't give you system access. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. This was beyond professional sabotage. This was personal. What's happening with the PowerGuard system? I asked, as Tara escorted me through security. Her expression grew even more troubled. It's not good. Ethan's been up all night trying to make Scott's changes work, but the system is behaving erratically during stress testing. Scott keeps saying it will be fine for the demonstration scenario, but... She trailed off, her silence more damning than words. The presentation room was already buzzing with activity when we arrived. Technicians tested the projection system while marketing staff arranged branded folders at each seat. Through the glass walls, I could see board members gathering in a nearby conference room, their expressions serious as they reviewed documents before the presentation. Scott stood at the front of the room, looking surprisingly composed in a new suit. He frowned when he saw me enter. "Mercedes," he said, his voice carrying across the room and drawing all eyes to us. "I didn't expect you to be here today. I understood you had pressing personal matters." I matched his public tone with my own. "I wouldn't miss this demonstration for anything, Scott. PowerGuard represents thousands of hours of my work as systems architect." A flicker of something ugly crossed his face before his professional mask slipped back into place. "How dedicated of you. Since you're here, you can sit in the back and observe. We wouldn't want to confuse the board with too many presenters." Before I could respond, the door opened and a group of executives entered. I recognized Martin Wells, the CEO of National Grid, accompanied by his technical team. Behind them came our board members, led by Chairman James Harrison, a former engineer known for his penetrating questions and low tolerance for technical failures. "Ladies and gentlemen," our CTO began once everyone was seated. "Thank you for joining us today for this demonstration of TechVantage's revolutionary PowerGuard system. This technology represents the future of grid management and failure prevention." I sat silently in the back corner, my laptop open but unable to access the company network. Scott took the floor, smoothly describing his team's innovative approach to grid management, using all the language from my original design documents without once mentioning my name. "The PowerGuard system can detect potential grid failures before they occur," Scott explained, clicking through slides I had created. "In the event of an emergency, it automatically implements containment protocols that prevent cascading failures, like the one that caused last summer's 3-state blackout." Chairman Harrison leaned forward. "What kind of response time are we looking at?" "That's the most exciting part," Scott replied with a confident smile. "Through recent optimizations, we've achieved sub-second response time, significantly faster than any competing system." I tensed. Those optimizations had stripped away critical redundancies. The system might respond quickly in a simple demonstration, but under real-world conditions, it would fail catastrophically. "Let's see it in action," Martin Wells suggested, checking his watch. "I'm particularly interested in how it handles unexpected events." Scott nodded to Ethan, who initiated the demonstration sequence. On the main screen, a simplified grid visualization appeared, showing power distribution across a model region. Everything looked normal, as Scott narrated the basic functions, pointing out monitoring capabilities and alert systems. "Now," Scott said with theatrical timing, "we'll simulate an emergency scenario similar to the conditions that caused last summer's blackout. PowerGuard will detect the initial failure and prevent it from cascading through the system." Ethan typed a command, initiating the stress test. For a moment, everything appeared to work perfectly. The system detected the simulated failure at a transfer station and began implementing containment protocols. The visualization showed the affected area isolated from the rest of the grid. Then everything went wrong. The screen froze momentarily before displaying a critical error message. Red warning indicators flashed across the visualization as the simulated failure broke containment and began spreading through the grid. And most alarmingly, a penalty counter appeared in the corner of the screen, rapidly incrementing, $95,000 per hour, and counting. The room fell into shocked silence. "What am I looking at?" Martin Wells demanded, standing up. Scott stared at the screen in horror. "This isn't. There must be a glitch in the demonstration environment." Ethan frantically typed commands, trying to regain control of the system. "The failover protection isn't responding. The redundancy systems are offline." Chairman Harrison's voice cut through the chaos. "Is that counter showing potential penalties for this type of failure?" "Yes," I answered from the back of the room, unable to remain silent any longer. "That's the regulatory penalty calculator I built into the system." It's showing what this type of cascading failure would cost in real time under current utility regulations. All eyes turned to me. "And who are you?" Martin Wells asked. Before I could answer, Scott jumped in. "This is Mercedes Taylor, one of our junior team members who has been out on personal leave. I'm the lead systems architect for PowerGuard," I corrected firmly. "And I've been working remotely due to family medical needs, not on personal leave." The penalty counter continued climbing past $200,000 as Ethan's efforts to regain control failed repeatedly. "Can someone explain what we're seeing here?" the CTO demanded, his face flushed with embarrassment. Scott pointed at me. "Mercedes has been working remotely with limited supervision. Her unauthorized code changes must have created vulnerabilities in the system." I stood up, fury finally overcoming professional caution. "That is absolutely false. The system was working perfectly until unauthorized changes were made after my access was revoked yesterday." Chairman Harrison raised his hand for silence. "We can assign blame later. Right now, I want to know if this can be fixed before we waste any more of our guests' time." He looked directly at me. "Miss Taylor, since you're the systems architect, can you resolve this issue?" Scott jumped in before I could respond. "She can't. She doesn't have system access, and even if she did, the changes are too extensive to address on the fly." The chairman's gaze remained on me, waiting for my answer. "I can fix it," I stated confidently, though my heart hammered in my chest. "But I'll need full system access restored immediately." "Absolutely not," Scott protested. "Giving her access during a critical failure could make things worse." Martin Wells checked his watch again. "We've already spent 30 minutes watching a demonstration of failure rather than success. My technical team and I have a flight to catch in 3 hours. Either fix this now, or we'll need to reconsider our position on the contract." The CTO looked at the chairman, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "Restore Miss Taylor's access immediately," the CTO ordered. "You have 1 hour to demonstrate a working system, or this project is dead." As the IT security team rushed to reinstate my credentials, Scott pulled me aside, his fingers digging into my arm. "This is your fault," he hissed, his public persona completely gone. "If we lose this contract, I'll make sure you never work in this industry again." I met his gaze steadily. "Take your hand off me, Scott. I'm going to fix your mistake, but after that, we're going to have a very different conversation about who's responsible for what." For the first time since I'd known him, Scott Andrews looked afraid. With my access restored, I retreated to an empty conference room to assess the damage. Tara joined me, bringing coffee and moral support as I dived into the system logs. "Talk me through what happened after I was locked out," I said, scanning through the revision history. "Scott had Ethan making changes until midnight," Tara explained, pulling up her own testing notes. "He kept pushing for faster response times, insisting that performance would be the key selling point during the demo. I found the critical modifications quickly. Just as I feared, they had gutted the redundancy systems I had carefully designed, all in pursuit of marginally faster performance metrics. But there was more. The changes weren't simply optimizations. They fundamentally altered the system's architecture in ways that made no technical sense. "This doesn't add up," I muttered, showing Tara a particularly puzzling modification. "See this change? It bypasses the emergency containment protocol completely. There's no performance benefit to that. It just makes the system vulnerable to exactly the kind of cascading failure we just witnessed." Tara frowned. "Ethan wouldn't make that change. He understands the containment protocols too well." "Pull up Ethan's direct commits," I requested, a suspicion forming in my mind. Tara filtered the logs to show only Ethan's contributions. Sure enough, his changes focused on legitimate optimizations, though some were ill-advised. But the most damaging modifications, the ones that directly caused the demonstration failure, weren't his. "Check Scott's credentials," I suggested. Tara's eyebrows shot up when she saw the results. He made direct code changes at 2 a.m., 4 hours after Ethan left. I didn't know Scott could even write code at this level. "He can't," I said grimly. "Someone gave him those changes. Or," a thought struck me, "check if he copied them from somewhere." After a few minutes of searching, Tara gasped. "Mercedes, look at this. These code segments Scott implemented? They're from the disaster recovery documentation you created 6 months ago. They're the examples of what not to do, the anti-patterns that would cause system failure." I stared at the screen in disbelief. He deliberately sabotaged the system using my own documentation as a guide. But why would Scott sabotage his own presentation? It made no sense unless... Tara, can you access Scott's email through the admin portal? She hesitated. That's really pushing the boundaries of my authorization. I know, I acknowledged. But we have less than 40 minutes to save a $40 million contract and potentially the company itself. This isn't about me or Scott anymore. After a moment's consideration, Tara nodded and began typing. Within minutes, she had accessed Scott's sent items through her QA admin credentials. Here, she said, turning the screen toward me. He sent these last night. I scanned the emails quickly, the picture becoming clearer with each message. Scott had been communicating with a board member named Richard Dawson about contingency plans if the PowerGuard demonstration failed to meet expectations. The thinly veiled suggestion was that such a failure would justify significant organizational changes, including the replacement of our current CTO with someone who understood the market better. Dawson's response was equally telling. If PowerGuard isn't salvageable, we'll need to consider the acquisition offer from GridSecure. Their CEO has assured me they would retain key leadership during the transition. GridSecure, our largest competitor who had been trying to acquire TechVantage for years. He wanted it to fail, I whispered, the full scope of the betrayal dawning on me. But he needed someone else to blame. Tara's eyes widened. You. Further investigation revealed an even deeper deception. 6 months earlier, a similar but smaller failure had occurred during preliminary testing with another client. Scott had covered it up by paying a $75,000 penalty from a discretionary budget and claiming it was for accelerated development resources. That incident had been caused by the same kind of architectural compromises Scott had just implemented. As I pieced together the evidence, a knock at the door interrupted my investigation. Chairman Harrison stood there, his expression unreadable. "Miss Taylor," he said formally, "I'd like an update on your progress." I gestured for him to enter. "Sir, I've identified the cause of the failure and have a solution ready to implement. But before I do, there's something you need to see." For the next 10 minutes, I walked the chairman through the evidence, the unauthorized changes, Scott's middle-of-the-night modifications, the emails suggesting collusion with Richard Dawson and potentially GridSecure, and the previous covered-up failure. Chairman Harrison's face darkened as the pattern of deception became clear. Why would Scott deliberately sabotage his own presentation? "I believe he was setting me up to take the fall for a catastrophic failure," I explained, "one that would justify major organizational changes and potentially support an acquisition by GridSecure. The emails suggest board member Dawson might benefit personally from such an acquisition." The chairman checked his watch. "You have 25 minutes left to fix this system before National Grid walks. Can you do it?" "Yes," I said confidently. I maintained secure backups of the original, fully tested code. I can restore it and implement an emergency bypass for the compromised components. "Do it," he ordered, standing to leave. "And Miss Taylor? Document everything. We'll address the other issues once the demonstration is salvaged." As the door closed behind him, I turned to my laptop with renewed determination. Scott had tried to destroy both my creation and my career. Now I would save both, and in doing so, expose his betrayal for everyone to see. I worked feverishly, restoring my original code while implementing additional protections against the specific vulnerabilities Scott had introduced. With each passing minute, the system grew stronger, its integrity restored piece by piece. Just as I was preparing to deploy the final fixes, the conference room door burst open. Scott stood there, his face contorted with rage. "Stop what you're doing immediately," he demanded. "You have no authorization to make these changes." "Actually, she does," Tara countered, holding up the written authorization from the CTO. "Full system access, emergency protocols." Scott lunged toward my laptop. "You don't understand what you're doing. Those changes will destroy everything." I moved my computer out of his reach. "The only thing being destroyed is your plan to sabotage this company for your own gain, Scott. We've seen the emails with Dawson and GridSecure." His face went pale. "Those are confidential communications you had no right to access. Just like you had no right to pass off my work as your own? Or cut my system access because I needed to take my mother to cancer treatment? or deliberately introduce failures into my code so you could blame me when it failed. The temporary restoration of my confidence seemed to push Scott over the edge. He grabbed for my laptop again, this time succeeding in grasping the edge. "Let go," I warned, trying to maintain my grip on the computer. "You're ruining everything," Scott growled, attempting to wrench the laptop away. "This company needs new leadership, not bleeding heart accommodations for every personal problem." As we struggled over the laptop, the door opened again. 2 security guards entered, followed by the chairman. "Mr. Andrews," the chairman said coldly, "remove your hands from that computer immediately." Scott froze, suddenly aware of how he must appear. "Sir, I was just trying to prevent unauthorized modifications to critical systems. Miss Taylor has full authorization to restore the system," the chairman stated, "and based on what I've seen in the last 15 minutes, you do not. Security will escort you to the executive conference room. Wait there until I come for you." As Scott was led away, his final glare promised this wasn't over. But for the first time in our 5-year professional relationship, I held all the power. I turned back to my laptop, deployed the final fixes, and ran a comprehensive test sequence. 8 minutes later, PowerGuard was fully restored and operating exactly as I had originally designed it. The redundancy systems were back online, the containment protocols were functioning properly, and the penalty counter had stopped its ominous climb. I stood up, smoothed my skirt, and nodded to Tara. "Let's go show them what PowerGuard can really do." The atmosphere in the presentation room had transformed during my absence. Board members huddled in tense conversation while National Grid executives checked emails and glanced impatiently at their watches. The counter on the main screen had stopped incrementing but still displayed the sobering figure, $327,000 in theoretical penalties. The chairman noticed me first. "Miss Taylor, are you ready?" All conversations ceased as heads turned toward me. I felt the weight of dozens of judgmental stares, executives who had already witnessed one catastrophic failure and had little reason to expect anything different now. "Yes, sir," I replied, connecting my laptop to the presentation system. "The issues have been identified and resolved. PowerGuard is ready for demonstration." "Before we waste any more time," Martin Wells interrupted, "I'd like to understand exactly what went wrong with the system we just saw fail spectacularly." All conversations ceased as heads turned toward me. I felt the weight of dozens of judgmental stares, executives who had already witnessed one catastrophic failure and had little reason to expect anything different now. "Yes, sir," I replied, connecting my laptop to the presentation system. "The issues have been identified and resolved. PowerGuard is ready for demonstration." "And who made these modifications?" the CTO asked, his expression tight with controlled anger. "The logs show the critical changes were made by Director Scott Andrews at 2 a.m. this morning, approximately 7 hours before the demonstration." A murmur ran through the room. "Where is Scott?" someone asked. "Mr. Andrews is addressing a separate matter," the chairman replied diplomatically. "Please continue, Miss Taylor." I walked the group through the restoration process, explaining how I had reinstated the original, fully tested code while implementing additional safeguards against the specific vulnerabilities that had been introduced. "In essence," I concluded, "what you saw fail was not the true PowerGuard system as designed and tested. What I'm about to demonstrate is the actual system, with all redundancy and safety features intact." Martin Wells leaned forward. "And the performance impact of these redundancy systems?" Scott emphasized sub-second response times as a key selling point. "PowerGuard achieves 1.2-second response time with full redundancy active," I answered honestly. "That's still 3 times faster than industry standards. We could strip out safeguards to hit sub-second performance, but that would be like removing the airbags from a car to make it slightly faster. The marginal speed improvement isn't worth the catastrophic risk." "Where is Scott?" someone asked. "Show us," the chairman directed, gesturing toward the demonstration environment. With confidence born of thousands of hours developing and testing this system, I initiated the same stress test that had failed so spectacularly earlier. This time, PowerGuard performed exactly as designed. When the simulated failure occurred at the transfer station, the system immediately implemented containment protocols, preventing the problem from spreading to connected grid sections. Most impressively, The penalty counter never appeared, as the cascade prevention eliminated the regulatory violations before they could occur. The system is working as expected, I narrated as various test scenarios played out successfully. PowerGuard not only detects potential failures but prevents them from cascading through interconnected systems. In this simulation based on last summer's blackout, the affected area is reduced by 87%, potentially saving millions in emergency response costs and regulatory penalties. Martin Wells turned to his technical lead. Assessment? The lead engineer, a woman with graying hair and sharp eyes, nodded appreciatively. The containment protocols are impressive. We've never seen this level of automated cascade prevention before. Just as the demonstration reached its successful conclusion, the door burst open and Scott strode in, ignoring the security guards who followed close behind. "This is a fraud," he announced loudly. "Mercedes has manipulated the testing environment to create artificially successful results." The chairman stood. "Mr. Andrews, you were instructed to wait. The board needs to know the truth," Scott insisted. "She's covering up fundamental flaws in the system's architecture. My changes were necessary corrections to her amateur design mistakes. I maintained my composure despite the simmering anger I felt." "That's demonstrably false. The logs clearly show you copied failure scenarios from my documentation and deliberately implemented them as improvements." "You're twisting the facts," Scott shot back. "I was fixing your mistakes. If you hadn't been distracted by personal issues, none of this would have happened." The mask had slipped completely now, revealing the petty, vindictive man beneath the professional facade. But rather than engage in a shouting match, I turned to National Grid's technical lead. "Miss Peterson," I addressed her directly, recalling her name from previous meetings. "Your team specializes in grid security and failure prevention. I invite you to examine the code yourself and determine whether the redundancy systems I've implemented are necessary or superfluous." She raised an eyebrow, clearly appreciating the direct appeal to her expertise. After getting a nod from Wells, she approached my laptop and spent several minutes reviewing the core architectural components while the room waited in tense silence. Finally, she straightened and addressed the group. "The redundancy systems are not only appropriate, but essential for real-world implementation. Removing them, as was done in the failed demonstration, would create unacceptable vulnerability to cascade failures." Scott's face flushed with anger. "This is a setup. She's manipulating all of you to cover her incompetence." "That's enough, Scott," the CTO said firmly. "The logs don't lie. You made unauthorized changes that directly caused the system failure, using examples from Mercedes' own documentation of what would break the system. And we've seen the emails," the chairman added quietly. Scott went very still. "What emails?" "Your communications with Richard Dawson regarding contingency plans if PowerGuard failed. Your discussions about the potential grid-secure acquisition that would follow such a failure." The blood drained from Scott's face. Those were theoretical discussions about market positioning. "They were evidence of sabotage and corporate espionage," the chairman corrected. "And combined with your deliberate undermining of a critical system before the most important demonstration in this company's history, they constitute grounds for immediate termination." Scott lunged toward my computer one final time. "I won't let you do this. That system is mine." Security guards intercepted him before he could reach me, restraining him as he continued to shout accusations and threats. "Remove him from the building," the chairman ordered. "HR will contact you about the terms of your separation, Mr. Andrews." As Scott was escorted out, still protesting his innocence, an uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Martin Wells broke it with a slow handclap. "Well," he said dryly, "this has certainly been the most dramatic system demonstration I've ever attended. But beneath the theatrics, I saw something impressive, a system that works as promised and an engineer who clearly knows what she's doing." He turned to me. "Miss Taylor, National Grid has strict requirements for our technology partners. We need people we can trust, who prioritize reliability over flash. Based on what I've seen today, you embody those values. If TechVantage is prepared to name you as the continuing lead architect for PowerGuard, we're prepared to move forward with the contract." All eyes turned to the chairman and CTO, who exchanged a quick glance before the chairman spoke. "Miss Taylor has demonstrated exceptional technical skill and professional integrity today. We would be honored to have her continue leading the PowerGuard development. Just 4 hours ago, I had been sitting in the back of the room, stripped of access and authority, watching my creation and career being systematically dismantled. Now I stood at the center, vindicated and empowered. The reversal was dizzying. "Thank you for your confidence," I said to Martin Wells. "PowerGuard has been my professional focus for 2 years. I'm deeply committed to ensuring it meets every expectation National Grid has for safety, reliability, and performance." As the meeting concluded with handshakes and renewed commitments, the chairman pulled me aside. "We have much to discuss about your future with the company," he said quietly. "But first, I believe you mentioned your mother is undergoing cancer treatment?" I nodded, surprised by the personal question. "Go to her," he said. "Take the rest of the day. We'll reconvene tomorrow to discuss next steps and appropriate accommodations for your family responsibilities." As I gathered my belongings, emotionally and physically drained from the day's events, Tara approached with a wide smile. "You were amazing," she said. "Everyone's talking about how you saved the company from disaster." "We saved it," I corrected her. "I couldn't have done this without your help." As I drove to my mother's house to share the news of my unexpected professional triumph, I reflected on how quickly fortunes could change. Scott's attempt to destroy me had instead revealed his own corruption and elevated me to a position I might never have achieved otherwise. Sometimes, it takes being wrongfully blamed for someone else's mistake to discover just how capable you truly are. The next morning, I arrived at the office to find my security clearance not only restored but upgraded. My name had been added to the executive access list, and my new temporary badge granted me entry to floors I'd never been authorized to visit before. "The chairman wants to see you right away," the security officer informed me as he handed over the badge. 15th floor, executive suite. As I rode the elevator upward, I mentally prepared for what was likely to be an intense debriefing. Yesterday's events had exposed not only Scott's betrayal but potentially deeper issues within the company's leadership, given board member Richard Dawson's apparent involvement. The executive suite featured the kind of understated luxury that spoke of serious money without flaunting it. The chairman's assistant greeted me by name and immediately ushered me into a large conference room where several people were already gathered. Chairman Harrison sat at the head of the table, flanked by our CEO and CTO. 3 board members occupied one side of the table, conspicuously missing Richard Dawson. On the other side sat Martin Wells and 2 executives from National Grid I hadn't met yesterday. "Miss Taylor," the chairman greeted me. "Thank you for joining us. Please take a seat." I sat in the empty chair nearest the door, acutely aware of being the most junior person in a room full of executives who collectively controlled billions in corporate assets. "We've been discussing yesterday's events and their implications," the chairman continued once I was settled. "Before we address the broader organizational questions, we'd like you to walk us through a full technical explanation of what happened with the PowerGuard system." For the next 40 minutes, I presented a comprehensive analysis of the PowerGuard architecture, the unauthorized changes that had been made, and the specific technical reasons those changes had caused the system failure. I supported each point with documentation and system logs, building an irrefutable case that left no doubt about what had transpired. To summarize, I concluded, the failure was not accidental. The logs clearly showed deliberate implementation of known vulnerability patterns, followed by attempts to shift blame to me after my system access was revoked. The room remained silent for several moments after I finished speaking. Finally, Martin Wells leaned forward. "Miss Taylor, your technical analysis is impressively thorough. What's less clear is the motivation. Why would a director deliberately sabotage his own presentation?" Before I could respond, the chairman intervened. "We believe Mr. Andrews was working with outside interests who stood to benefit from TechVantage's failure and subsequent devaluation. That aspect is being handled by our legal team and is not the focus of today's discussion." He turned to me. "What is relevant is your solution to the crisis. We'd like you to demonstrate the restored system for everyone here." With my confidence growing, I connected my laptop to the room's display system and walked through a complete PowerGuard demonstration. This time, without Scott's interference, the system performed flawlessly, showcasing all the features and protections I had designed. As you can see, I narrated as the simulation concluded, with the proper architecture restored. PowerGuard not only prevents cascading failures but provides real-time mitigation options that could save utilities millions during emergency scenarios. National Grid's technical team peppered me with challenging questions, which I answered with the deep knowledge that comes from having built a system from the ground up. When their inquiries finally ceased, Martin Wells nodded with satisfaction. "I've seen enough," he announced. "National Grid is prepared to move forward with the contract, with one condition: Miss Taylor remains the technical lead on the project with direct reporting access to our implementation team." The CEO raised an eyebrow. "That's an unusual arrangement for a staff engineer." Yesterday's events demonstrated the risks of filtering critical technical information through managers with limited understanding and questionable motives, Wells replied bluntly. "We're not interested in repeating that experience." The chairman and CEO exchanged glances before the chairman responded. "We're prepared to accommodate that request, assuming Miss Taylor is agreeable." All eyes turned to me, awaiting my response. The opportunity was exceptional, but I had learned the importance of clear boundaries. "I'm honored by the confidence National Grid has shown in me," I began carefully. "I'm fully committed to the success of PowerGuard and would be pleased to serve as technical lead. However, I need to be transparent about my current family situation. My mother's cancer treatment requires me to be unavailable certain days of the week. I can manage the workload with flexible scheduling and remote work, but that's non-negotiable." I held my breath, half expecting pushback or dismissal of my personal concerns as Scott had done repeatedly. Instead, the chairman nodded thoughtfully. "Family obligations are part of life," he said. "This company has been too inflexible in accommodating them, to our detriment. Your performance yesterday proved that remote work arrangements need not compromise quality or commitment." The CEO looked less convinced but didn't object as the chairman continued. "We'll establish a formal, flexible work arrangement that accommodates your mother's treatment schedule. Your team can coordinate around those fixed commitments." Relief washed over me. This was the respect and accommodation I had sought all along, not special treatment, but simply the flexibility to honor both my professional and personal obligations. As the meeting shifted to contract details, the CFO joined us, bringing sobering financial information. "The actual impact of yesterday's demonstration failure is significant," he reported. "Beyond the $75,000 in direct system penalties, we incurred substantial reputation damage. Initial estimates suggest it could have cost us up to $2 million in lost contract value had Miss Taylor not salvaged the situation." The chairman frowned. "And the previous incident Mr. Andrews covered up?" $75,000, exactly as Miss Taylor uncovered, the CFO confirmed. "It was disguised as accelerated development costs, but reviewing the transaction records confirms it was a penalty payment to Western Regional Utilities after a similar failure 6 months ago." This revelation sent a ripple of concern through the executives. One pattern failure might be dismissed as an isolated incident, but 2 identical failures suggested systemic problems. "I want a full audit of all projects Scott Andrews touched," the chairman directed. "And Miss Taylor, I'd like you to lead a technical review of our development practices to ensure nothing like this happens again." Just as the meeting appeared to be concluding, Scott Andrews made one final, desperate attempt to salvage his reputation. The conference room door swung open, and he strode in uninvited, a security guard hurrying behind him. "I apologize for the interruption," the guard said breathlessly. "He claimed you were expecting him." "It's fine," the chairman said, waving off the guard. "Mr. Andrews, you were explicitly instructed not to return to the building today." Scott ignored him, focusing instead on the National Grid executives. "You're being manipulated," he insisted. "Mercedes engineered this entire situation to make herself look like a hero. She deliberately introduced vulnerabilities into the system months ago, knowing they would eventually fail." The accusation was so outlandish that a surprised laugh escaped me before I could suppress it. "That's an interesting theory," Martin Wells replied, his tone making it clear he found it anything but. "It would require Miss Taylor to somehow predict you would lock her out of the system, make unauthorized changes using vulnerability patterns from her own documentation, and then publicly blame her when they inevitably failed, all while ensuring her mother would need cancer treatment at the precisely coinciding time." Scott's desperate gambit collapsed under the weight of its own absurdity. As security personnel escorted him from the room for the final time, The chairman addressed the group. I apologize for that interruption. Mr. Andrews is no longer associated with TechVantage in any capacity. As the meeting formally concluded, the CTO asked me to stay behind. When everyone else had filed out, he closed the door and turned to me with an expression that mingled embarrassment with resolve. I owe you an apology, he began. I should have questioned Scott's actions when he revoked your system access. The warning signs were there, and I missed them. His candor surprised me. In my 5 years at TechVantage, I had never heard an executive admit a mistake so directly. I appreciate that, I responded sincerely. More importantly, he continued, the chairman has asked me to create a new position reporting directly to me, Director of Engineering Excellence. The role would involve overseeing technical standards, mentoring junior engineers, and importantly, helping shape our workplace culture to better accommodate diverse needs and prevent the kind of toxic leadership Scott embodied. He paused, studying my reaction. We'd like you to take the position. For a moment, I couldn't find words. The offer represented not just a significant promotion, but an opportunity to create systemic change within the company. Would this role include continuing as technical lead on PowerGuard? I asked when I found my voice. Yes, at least through the initial implementation phase. The director position would gradually expand as you build your team. I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment, the years of having my contributions minimized or appropriated, the struggle to be taken seriously, the painful choice between career advancement and family obligations. Yes, I said finally. I accept the position, on one condition. I want to work with HR to create a comprehensive, flexible work policy that applies to all employees with caregiving responsibilities, not just special accommodations for me. The CTO smiled, extending his hand. That's exactly why you're the right person for this job. Welcome to the executive team, Director Taylor. As we shook hands, I realized this moment represented not just personal vindication, but an opportunity to transform the workplace culture for everyone who would come after me. Sometimes being wrongfully blamed doesn't just reveal your strength, but also your purpose. 3 months passed in a whirlwind of activity. As the newly appointed Director of Engineering Excellence, I divided my time between overseeing the PowerGuard implementation, building my department from the ground up, and supporting my mother through her ongoing cancer treatments. The flexible work policy I helped design had been formally adopted company-wide, allowing me to structure my schedule around her needs without compromising my professional responsibilities. The changes at TechVantage went far deeper than just my promotion. The scandal surrounding Scott and board member Richard Dawson had triggered a governance overhaul. Dawson resigned from the board after his communications with Grid Secure came to light, and 2 additional board members stepped down shortly thereafter. The company emerged stronger, with renewed commitment to ethical leadership and technical integrity. On a crisp autumn morning, I sat in my new office on the executive floor, reviewing the quarterly performance metrics for PowerGuard's initial deployment. The results exceeded even my optimistic projections. During a minor grid disturbance in the western region last month, the system had successfully prevented a potential cascade failure, saving National Grid an estimated $1.2 million in emergency response costs and regulatory penalties. A knock at my door interrupted my review. The chairman, recently elevated to CEO after the previous chief executive's retirement, stood in the doorway. "Got a minute?" he asked. "Of course," I replied, gesturing toward the visitor chair. I was just reviewing the PowerGuard performance data. The system prevented exactly the kind of cascade failure it was designed to catch. He nodded, settling into the chair. Martin Wells called me personally to express his appreciation. National Grid is discussing expanding the contract to cover their entire Eastern Division, potentially doubling the project scope. "That's excellent news," I said, feeling a surge of pride in what my team had accomplished. "It is," he agreed. "But that's not why I stopped by. How's your mother doing?" The personal question still surprised me, though it shouldn't have after 3 months of consistent support from the new leadership team. "The doctors are cautiously optimistic," I answered. "The latest scan showed significant reduction in tumor size. She's responding well to treatment." "I'm glad to hear it." His smile seemed genuinely warm. "And how are you finding the balance between your personal and professional responsibilities?" "Challenging but manageable," I admitted. The flexible work policy has been transformative. Being able to schedule around her treatment appointments without guilt or fear of career penalties has made all the difference. The personal question still surprised me, though it shouldn't have after 3 months of consistent support from the new leadership team. The doctors are cautiously optimistic, I answered. The latest scan showed significant reduction in tumor size. She's responding well to treatment. Speaking of thriving, he continued, the board has reviewed your proposal for the Engineering Excellence Mentorship Program. It's been approved with full funding. The program had been my most ambitious initiative yet, a structured mentorship system designed to help junior engineers, particularly those from underrepresented groups, navigate the often opaque path to technical leadership. Each participant would be paired with a senior engineer who would provide not just technical guidance but career advocacy. Thank you, I said, genuinely moved. This program has the potential to transform our engineering culture from the ground up. I agree, he stood, signaling the end of our conversation. You've accomplished remarkable things in a short time, Mercedes, not just technically, but culturally. Keep pushing us to be better. After he left, I turned to the window, taking a moment to absorb how dramatically my professional life had changed. 3 months ago, I had been fighting for basic accommodation and recognition. Now I was helping reshape the company's fundamental approach to talent development and work-life balance. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Time to leave for my mother's treatment appointment. I gathered my laptop, knowing I could continue working from the hospital's family room while she received her infusion. This seamless integration of professional and personal obligations still felt like a small miracle after years of forced separation between the two spheres of my life. As I waited for the elevator, I noticed a young woman hovering nearby, clutching a tablet and looking nervous. Director Taylor? She asked tentatively. I'm Julia Barnes, new to the verification team. I was hoping to speak with you, if you have a moment. I'm actually headed out to a family appointment, I explained. But I can spare a few minutes. Walk with me? Relief washed over her face as she fell into step beside me. Thank you. I've been working on a testing framework for the Western expansion of PowerGuard, and I'm encountering some resistance from the senior engineers. They keep saying my approach is too cautious and will slow down deployment. The situation sounded painfully familiar. Send me your framework documentation, I said as we reached the parking garage. I'll review it this afternoon. If it's as thorough as it sounds, I'll back you up in tomorrow's technical review. Her expression brightened. Really? That would be amazing. The framework includes some redundancy testing that no one else seems to think is necessary, but after studying the PowerGuard incident from 3 months ago, you realize those redundancies are exactly what prevent catastrophic failures, I finished for her. She nodded eagerly. Exactly. Trust your technical judgment, Julia, I advised, unlocking my car. If you can demonstrate why those tests are necessary, stand your ground, but document everything. Evidence is your strongest ally in technical disagreements. Thank you, she said with genuine gratitude. Everyone said you were approachable, but I was still nervous. As I drove to the oncology center, I reflected on that final exchange. 3 months ago, I had been fighting for my professional survival. Now I was in a position to ensure other talented engineers wouldn't face the same struggles. The transformation wasn't just in my title or office location, but in my capacity to create positive change throughout the organization. At the treatment center, my mother greeted me with a smile that looked stronger than it had in weeks. The latest round of chemotherapy seemed to be taking less of a toll on her energy, a promising sign. How was work today? She asked, as I settled into the chair beside her treatment recliner. Surprisingly good, I replied, sharing the news about the mentorship program approval and National Grid's interest in expanding the contract. I'm so proud of you, she said, reaching for my hand. You stood up for yourself when it would have been easier to give in. That takes real courage. Her words touched something deep within me. I had a good example, I told her, squeezing her hand gently. You never taught me to back down from a fight worth having. As she received her treatment, I worked remotely, reviewing Julia's testing framework and finding it impressively thorough. I sent her a message of support, copying the technical lead on her team to signal my endorsement. Small actions like this, repeated consistently, would gradually reshape our engineering culture into one where good ideas were valued regardless of who proposed them. On my drive home that evening, a familiar name on a roadside billboard caught my eye. Grid Secure, the competitor that had attempted to exploit TechVantage's vulnerability. Below their logo, a smaller tagline announced, "Proudly led by Scott Andrews, former Director of Innovation at TechVantage." I couldn't help but laugh at the audacity. Scott had landed on his feet, as people like him often did, rewriting his history to erase his failures. But his reputation within the industry had been irreparably damaged. 2 former clients had already contacted me privately to inquire about the real story behind his departure. Truth has a way of spreading, even when powerful people try to suppress it. I didn't need to actively discredit Scott. His own actions and the resulting consequences spoke far more eloquently than any criticism I could offer. 6 months after the PowerGuard incident, I received an Industry Leadership Award for innovation in grid management systems. Standing at the podium before hundreds of my peers, I reflected on the journey that had brought me there. Engineering excellence isn't just about technical brilliance, I told the audience. It's about creating environments where that brilliance can flourish, regardless of who possesses it or what personal challenges they may be navigating. The best solutions emerge when we value both the work and the whole humans doing that work. As applause filled the ballroom, I caught sight of my mother in the audience, now in remission and beaming with pride. Beside her sat the chairman-turned-CEO, who had become not just my boss but a valued mentor. And throughout the crowd, members of my team, including Julia, who was now leading the testing division for the expanded PowerGuard deployment. The path to this moment had been neither straight nor easy. Being wrongfully blamed for a catastrophic failure had nearly derailed my career. But in fighting to clear my name, I had discovered strengths I didn't know I possessed and opportunities I might never have otherwise found. Sometimes life's greatest challenges become our greatest catalysts for growth, if we have the courage to stand firm in our truth when others try to distort it. My experience taught me that standing up for yourself isn't just a personal victory, but potentially a transformation that benefits everyone around you. Have you ever been wrongfully blamed for someone else's mistake? How did you handle it, and what did you learn from the experience? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you found value in my journey, please like this video, subscribe to the channel for more stories of professional triumph over adversity, and share with anyone who might be facing similar challenges in their workplace. Thank you for listening, and remember, your greatest professional strength might be revealed in your moment of greatest vulnerability.